Hey buddy, what's up? I start all of my days with workouts and exercises, or if not workouts, with some game or sports. And you know what? I love doing that because that keeps me healthy. And you know what? These exercises, workout, they need a lot of energy and body movement. Now, body movement is one of the most important character features of living organisms. And there are so many body movements going on in your body. Do you know how? Okay, winking of my eye or blinking of my eye, or pumping of heart or the blood from my heart, or respiration or breathing in and out. That is also body movement. For example, you run, you skip, or you jump, or you walk. All of these are the examples of body movement as well. Interestingly, body movements or the movements from one place to another is the characteristic feature that distinguishes plants from animals. Apparently, plants cannot move from one place to another, but animals, they can move from one place to another. And you know what? There are different animals that actually move from one place to another in different ways, right? For example, some walk, some use swimming, some use jumping, some use running, and some also use crawling. And you know what? There are different body parts that are used to move from one place to another. So, in this chapter, we're going to discuss about movement in animals, right? It's so interesting. Let's get started. Now, let's record some of the body movements that we can actually do. When I'm talking about my neck, I can rotate it like this. And when I'm talking to my hand, I can rotate it like this. But when it comes to my elbow, I can actually take my arm like this, but I cannot take it the other side. Or when it comes to my finger, I can actually bend it this way, but I cannot bend it this way. So isn't it interesting to find out that there are some parts of our body which we can rotate completely, but there are some parts of our body which we can rotate partially. This is our body and these are the movements that we can do. But see, now I have my nose, I cannot rotate it. Or my eyes, I cannot rotate it as well. But moving on, when we see or when I take my hands or my fingers to this part of my shoulders or at the top of my head or somewhere around here on my forehead or somewhere around here in my fingers, you can do this. Do you feel something really hard pressing? Now those hard parts of our bodies are called as bones. Now you can do this experiment in many parts like your legs, your toes, your head, and you can see there are so many bones, isn't it? Now I'm sure you must have found out what we are going to learn about today. Yes, we are going to learn about the body movements in animals and human beings. So we were in bones. Now there are so many bones, right? There is a framework of the skeletal system that consists of the bones and cartilages, and that is called as the skeleton. This skeletal system gives a proper shape and framework to our body, and this skeletal system in human beings consists of 206 bones in total. So many bones, right? That's interesting. On one hand, when we say that bones are hard, on the other hand, we have cartilages that are soft. Cartilages are present between the joints and the elastic organs like earlobe, upper ear, and nose. Cartilages happen to reduce the friction between the joints. Now, let's learn more about the human skeletal system. The human skeletal system consists of the following parts like the skull, the ribs, the backbone, and the limbs. First, considering the skull is made up of 22 bones and all of them are joined, leaving behind the lower jaw. The lower jaw is not joined and helps us in chewing the food and talking. The bones that are present in the skull help to protect the brain from the external injury. Coming next, we have the backbone that is also called as the spine. It consists of 33 bones that are also called as vertebrae. The backbones are also connected to the rib joints or the rib cages. The backbone protects the spinal cord of our body. It is also located or it starts from the neck part of our body. You can actually locate the backbone if you run your hand on the central part of your backside and find the hard bony structure. Yes, that is called as the backbone. Moving on next, we have the rib bones. Rib bones are actually thin, flat and curved shaped bones that make a protective cage-like structure and give protection to the organs like heart and lungs. This on the screen as you see is called as a rib cage. It is made up of 24 bones and these 12 pairs of rib cages or rib bones are called as rib cages. Now rib cages or rib bones are actually meeting or they join the backbone at the back. You can actually feel your rib bones by actually putting your hands or running your hands on your chest. Up next, we have limbs. Limbs are of two types. One, the legs are the limbs and they are called as the lower limbs. And secondly, we have the arms and they are called as the upper limbs. Now, all of these together constitute the skeletal system of our body. It's a perfect skeletal system that gives a framework to our body, right? Yes, it gives a perfect framework and shape to our body. Movement in the human body actually happens or is possible because of the teamwork between the bones and the muscles. And at such cases, the movement only happens at the places where two or more bones meet or are joined. Bones, as we know or as we have discussed, are very hard and you can also see them. You can feel them as well. But I have a question. When they cannot be bent, actually, how do we actually bend our hand like this or rotate my hand like this or wrist or my hand I rotate like this? How do I do it? Interestingly, these or movements are happening or they happen at the place where the bones meet each other, and the points or the places where the bones meet with each other are called as joints. So basically, joints are the places or locations where two or more bones meet or converge with each other. In our body, these bones help in the movement of our body. So, there are actually two kinds of joints that we have in our body. The first one is fixed joints, in which there is no movement of bones possible, and movable joints in which the movement of bones is actually possible. Now, let's talk about the movable joints of our body. The movable joints of our body are of many types, like the ball and socket joint, the hinge joint, and the pivot joint. Now let's start talking about the ball and socket joint. In this joint, what happens is the rounded end of one bone actually fits into the cavity of the other bone and thus allows or permits the complete movement of that bone or that joint. For example, the joint that you have between the shoulder and the arm is actually the ball and socket joint, and thus you can see this kind of a complete rotationary motion happening in your body. Or otherwise, you have the joint between the thigh and the hip bone is also a ball and socket joint. Next, we will be talking about the pivot joint. Pivot joints are the ones which actually allow the movement in the up and down direction and in the sideways directions only. So, the joint that is present between the skull and the vertebral column of your body is an example of the pivot joint. Up next, we have the hinge joints. The hinge joints are actually similar to the hinges that are present in the doors. These joints actually help us in the up and down movement only. And so, the joint that you have in your knee or the joint that you have in the elbow, as you see the up and down movement only, are the examples of the hinge joints. Lastly, we're going to talk about the gliding joints. Gliding joints or the movement in the gliding joints happens by the sliding of the bones on one another. So, the bones in the rings of the backbone are actually the examples of gliding joints, and the joints that are present in your wrist are the examples of gliding joints as well. Now that we have talked about the joints, do you know that bones and muscles are attached to each other and that helps in movement? We will learn about that right now. Now that we have talked about joints, do you know that muscles are attached to the bones at the points of joints and thus it helps in the movement? Now the question arises, how do muscles help in the movement? The answer lies in the question or in the point that muscles have the property of contraction and relaxation, and thus this helps in the movement of joints and the bones. Now, I would want you to do an experiment or an activity. Now, what I would want you to do is make a fist like this and fold your arm like this. Do you feel anything in your arm like this or the upper arm like this? Yes, this bulge is an example of the muscles and they have contracted here. So, when the muscles contract, they actually become stiffer, thicker and shorter, and thus the contraction gives rise to the bulge here. And now, when you leave the hand back to the normal situation or the normal position, it's all normal right now. So that time it was contracted and now it is relaxed. Muscles always work in pair. So, when one of the muscles is actually contracted, it pulls the bones towards that direction and the other pair is relaxed. Now, to get the bone to the opposite direction, what happens is the other pair actually contracts back and then pulls the bones towards itself. Thus, we can see that the muscle can only pull, it can never push. And thus, two pairs of muscles are always required for the movement of bones and the muscles. Thus, this is how we can say that a pair of muscles is always helpful and it works like this. So basically, in this video, we learned about body movements and how they move. We learned about bones, the skeletal system and some parts of the muscles as well. I will be back with yet another concept in this chapter. Till then, have all the fun with your bones, muscles and movements.